Hello, everyone. Welcome to another section of the Afrobeats class. Today, we are going to be exploring the difference between Afrobeat without the S and Afrobeats with the S. And to engage with this whole idea of Afrobeats with S or without the S, we will explore Dotun Oyebade's work entitled Introduction Afrobeat's lower frequencies. My goal in this presentation is to just give you a brief overview of what the assigned reading is about, and I implore you to walk through the details of questions, discussions, and every information that is added to this module so you can discuss more and engage with the material at length. I also integrate some music ranging from Fela Kuti's work, Tyler's work, Davido's music, and Libianca's music. All of these, you're going to be exploring it to make sense of the idea of Afrobeats with the S or without the S, and what the whole idea of lower frequencies imply. So, to just get you started, when you think about Afrobeat, I want to go back a little bit to what we learned earlier in this course. So we talked about Afrobeat without the S as a genre of African music that was championed by Fela Anikulapo Kuti in southwestern Nigeria. And we also mentioned that Anikulapo Kuti initially rejected the idea of Afrobeat, but Afrobeats has lived beyond even Fela's work because it has gone beyond just the Afrobeat that was centered around political movement, interest of the masses, protecting the interests of the masses, and more. And so when you think about Afrobeats, think about the most dominant form of popular culture on the continent, and it has lasted for at least more than a decade. And Afrobeats with the S embraces Black diasporic constructions of Africa. So it is not just Africa as it is conceived as a geographical bounded region in on the continent of Africa, but Africa in the world, Africa and the expression of the cultures, the language, and the iteration of what Africa stands for. And so all of these are what Afrobeat does. And because of the work of Afrobeat, it gives an entrance into the echo chamber of Black modernity. So, modernity, as conceived from the lens of Blackness, is encapsulated in the idea of Afrobeat because Afrobeat embodies what Blackness implies, not just on the continent, but across the various spaces. And so, the difference between Afrobeat and the Afrobeats, like I was already talking about. So, Afrobeat without an S, it names a distinct genre with peculiar sonic and aesthetic qualities, mythologies, bibliography, imaginaries of the diaspora. And Afrobeat, like I already mentioned, it synthesizes both funk, jazz, and high life music. It's also built on the idea of call and response that was part of the African, musical practices. And several forms of African instruments were part of the motivations and part of the ideas that led to the development of the Afrobeat music as a form of music that has a fusion of several forms of musical genre and um, instrument, and it was consolidated actually in the early 1970s, and Fela being one of the lead musicians who was doing Afrobeat was focused more on political movement, political response to different kinds of exploitations of the government and speaking truth to power. Um, but Afrobeats without the S Um, so generally, it prides itself on subversive politic, right, and all the struggle of the masses. But the Afrobeats with the S began with DJ Abranti of Ghana, who first named it Afrobeat, and in its conceptualization of Afrobeats, he engages with it as a genre of music that transcended the national designation of just Ghana music or Niger beats. Afrobeats for DJ Abranti, also called Abranti Boateng, um, Afrobeat does respect nor diminish Africa's history or cultural diversity. Instead, he thinks of Afrobeat as a way to bring the culture of Africa to the center stage, to the global, to be incorporated into global music. And so it focuses more on the sounds that makes the beats a discernible African beat. And right now, it is not just the Niger beats, the Ghanaian kind of beats, but it also include all forms of music, including the Amapiano that we have in South Africa right now, and several iterations of African genre of music in Congo, in Cameroon, and in fact in the diaspora. I would argue that pop culture generally would be a large umbrella that will help us make sense of what Afrobeats with the S looks like now. And so, from the reading, you're going to make sense of how the works of Fela constitutes a foundation to Afrobeat, and how the ongoing works of several artists continues to challenge the idea of Afrobeat, how Afrobeat moved from the dimension of its political intervention and the rhetorics around that, and how such rhetorics has now become more of marketing the African presence, African representation, the African voice. And Oyebade in his work, Dr. Oyebade in his work, or Dr. Ajibade in his work, gives us an insight into Davido's speech and how that brings African voice, and African presence into the diaspora. Davido in his speech talked about collaboration and the need for Africans across the world to come together and continue to market, embody, and spread the cultures of African languages and cultures. However, when we look at the award categories, especially the one where Tyler won, then it becomes questionable what constitutes the African culture. What language should we even consider as Afrobeat or not Afrobeat, or it does not matter? And all of these are ideas that we are going to get into, and what specifically is lower frequencies, right? So lower frequencies has to do with all forms of knowledge productions that are created through Afrobeats with the S, but that are lost in the beats and the catchy music, and that seems as not really gain enough attention to help us see the complexity of ideas and knowledge that are embedded in Afrobeats. And so these are some of the questions we're going to be engaging with. I need you to read through page 5 to 6 of this chapter that I have assigned to you, to see the questions being raised by um, scholars in the field of African cultural studies, and how they are engaging with the question of low currencies across different kinds of music and productions from Africa, and in fact in the diaspora. I look forward to reading your responses to the questions and the discussion. Thank you very much. Feel free to reach out to me if you need any clarification or you want me to answer any question. Enjoy your work.